Welcome to Writers on Writing. Writers on Writing comes to you from Medgar Evers College and gives you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their lives, and their craft. I am Dr. Brenda Greene, Executive Director of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College and Director of the National Black Writers Conference. And I am very pleased to have with me today Asha Bandele. Welcome, Asha.
Hi, Dr. Greene. It's so good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and you can call me Brenda.
Okay.
Okay. Asha. Asha Bandele is an award-winning author and journalist. She has been a features editor for Essence magazine, and you are the author of a very well-known memoir called The Prisoner's Wife.
Yes.
And also a poet and a novelist.
Yes.
Because you wrote the novel Daughter.
Right.
And you have just recently written your newest memoir, Something Like Beautiful, one single mother's story. And so we are very pleased to have you and to hear more about what that process was like and why at this point in your life did you decide to write the second memoir.
That's a great question. This in some ways follows where A Prisoner's Wife left off, that book detailing my marriage to a man who was incarcerated. And as soon as that book came out, I became pregnant with his child, and I don't think I ever thought I'd write another memoir, but there were so many twists and turns, ups and downs about being a single mother that I hadn't predicted, and that I really struggled through. I thought about all of my sisters who are out here who might have been going through any of the similar things that I went through, struggles with depression, not taking care of myself, drinking too much at times, smoking cigarettes, whatever bad behaviors, bad relationships that happened after my husband. I think we often never talk about that as mothers. We feel guilt. We feel as though we have to be perfect at every moment. And, in many ways, The Prisoner's Wife was a story of coming up, that I'd already had my struggles, and the love transformed me up. And then in many ways, to people who knew me, I looked like somebody on top. I was an Essence editor. I was at celebrity parties all the time. And that even within that, if I could say, it wasn't easy. I did make mistakes. I made choices that were not in the best interest of either myself or my daughter, but we're still here, we're still standing, we're still defined by love and beauty. I wanted to say that for all the other women who never get a chance to open up and say how it really is, because that's the only way we're going to change it, is if we can at least say this is the truth as we live it, and this is where we are, and this is where we need to go.
Right. Well, I found your memoir so powerful, and I have to say there were times I just had to stop and put it down and think, because it was just really, really moving. I just thought it was so courageous that you were that honest. It was almost like being brutally honest. And as you said, this is something that people don't talk about and people are not encouraged to talk about. So I commend you for having the courage to be that open and to share what so many people hide, or they write about in their journal and no one ever gets to know.
Right, and they don't get to heal.
They never get to heal. The whole idea of going to therapy, realizing that you can't do this by yourself. That's something people need to hear.
That's right.
I
think especially in our community, we see manifestations of depression in a million ways, whether it's through addiction or whether it's just through the woman who works in your corner drugstore who's just always nasty to everybody.
Right.
She's probably depressed.
Right.
And it's just, we've got to begin to speak about it, because if we don't talk about it, we're never going to get past it.
I agree. One of the things that also struck me about your book is that I could definitely see the poet. It's almost like there were parts of it that were prose poetry. Can you talk a little bit about how your life as a poet, your poetic life impacted on what you were writing, how you were writing, the craft itself?
Well, I'll tell you, Sonia Sanchez, the great poet Sonia Sanchez, said once that poetry is the strictest taskmaster. With a book, you can have a great book and a bad chapter within that. You miss a word in a poem, and it can throw the entire of the poem off. And so I think I'm very conscious about what words come after what words, rhythm, alliteration, how you tell a story. Do you tell everything just up front, or do you let people work between the lines? And all of that is my training as a poet. I mean, there's also some training in there, as a journalist, where you just kind of hit people with facts.
Right.
But in general, I think that poetry demands a certain kind of precision of language that I hope that I bring, beauty and precision, that I hope that I bring when I'm writing prose.
So what was that process like? Because you obviously do bring it. What was the process that you went through when you were crafting this memoir? At times it almost felt like a stream of consciousness, that it was the way it flowed.
Yeah, there were moments like that, and I have to be completely honest. This was the hardest book I ever had to write. It was much harder than The Prisoner's Wife, where I had my own fears about putting that out there. So this is the third or fourth rendition of this memoir, and I wrote copies, and my editor, who's worked with me on 3 of my books, just kept handing it back because we weren't there. So she works with me a lot on organization. I mean, I've found in my own writing process that doing a good piece is often a collaborative effort between a great editor and a great writer. And I've seen people who are very talented but would do well to have a good editor.
Yes.
And so she really helped me weave and form that narrative arc. And there were times where maybe I was too stream of consciousness in prior editions of the manuscript, and people didn't know what was going on, and I realized it was me hiding. Let me be a little bit vague here. Let me not put everything out because I was ashamed and I didn't want to say it. And in those moments, she would push me, like, here is not the place to be stream of consciousness. Here is the place to say what it is. And so with a good editor, I think you find that balance, to be able to move in and out, because we do think as humans in stream of consciousness, but sometimes you just have to name what the thing is directly.
Right. How did you, as just continuing in that vein, how did you decide in writing the memoir what to include and what to leave out? And you said your editor helped you in some points, but what made you, what guided your decisions on what you should include?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, and this is true certainly of the other memoir, is that there is a real difference between secrecy and privacy. And I've talked about this for a long time. I have a right to my privacy. When I start feeling like I want to be secret about something, it's usually because I'm afraid or I feel shame. So I think I try to hit the notes that are common to, or what I believe will be common to other women, what will be relevant to other women. And that's not the stuff that would just be in my journal or what have you. If I'm putting this out there in the world, I want to put out there the notes that I think will resonate with other women, and they can see themselves, or whoever the reading audience is, they can see themselves and say, oh yeah, I remember when I felt like that. Oh yeah, I remember falling down and getting up that way. Or, oh yeah, I need that piece of advice. And I try to make decisions based on that. I obviously don't put everything. This spans about 8 years, so not everything is in this relatively small volume. But it's the things I think that people most need to know, the lessons I most took from my own falling down and getting up.
Okay. And you also teach memoir writing.
Yes, I do.
And so as someone who's a teacher and a writer, what message would you have to give people who are thinking about writing a memoir? Because as you know, this is the season of the memoir. Everybody's writing memoirs. So why write one, and what guidance can you give to people?
I think one of the most important things, and memoir is not autobiography. People often mix them up. So a memoir is a snapshot, a piece of your life, a period of time, and it doesn't have to be everything. The first thing that I find most people have to figure out is, why are you writing this book? Why are you coming to the page right now? And what is the message that you want to put out to a wider audience? You're not writing when you're going into the public sphere just for you. You're writing for, even though it may be cathartic for you, if it's just for you, then that's just for your journal. If it's for a larger public, it's like, what is the message here? There's a lot of things I could have put about prisons and The Prisoner's Wife, for example, and people said, oh, you didn't tell this part of it, you didn't tell that part of it. But my primary message in that book was that love transforms. It transforms up. My primary message here is that women and mothers can be great mothers and still suffer and go through a hard time, and we can still get back up and shine, even if we felt as though we were dull for moments, hours, years, or months, whatever it was, and that we can heal and that we can move past whatever difficulties, and we're not the sum total of our hurt. We're the sum total of our effort and our whole lives. So a lot of times when people sit down to write memoir, I find like they're all over the place. They don't know where to start, where to begin. They may be working out anger at a mother,
right.
And this is really not that place. It's not to say you can't be angry at your mother in a memoir if she's a person who deserves some anger, but if anger is the only thing you're bringing, then there's no balance.
Well, you talk to mothers, but you also have a message for your daughter. And you talk or you describe in the memoir about how much you've learned from your daughter. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how this also is a message for the younger people, and to how the relationships that people have with their daughters?
You know, the generation my mother was raised in, there wasn't the same kind of dialogue, there wasn't TV, you know, the way that we know it now. There certainly were talk shows. And so you grow up and you sort of don't know why your parents are the way they are, why they make these decisions and not that one. And it can create conflict. And I kind of, not that I'm having my daughter read this book now, she's only 9, but I kind of wanted my daughter to know who I am, how I became the woman and the mother I became. Because sometimes I think, you know, I remember a friend of mine whose father went to prison, and he said, you know, he saw his mother shift, and she never talked with him. He never understood, how did she become the way she became? And I think that's important for children to know, and it's validating for children to know that it wasn't just that, you know, it wasn't me. Children take on so much. Was it my fault? Did I do something wrong? And this was to say, no, she did nothing wrong. She did everything right just by showing up. And that she's my great joy. It is in very many ways a love letter to my daughter. And I wanted her to know that, so that even in moments where she thinks mommy's mad or whatever, she can always have this book to turn to and say, no, my mommy loves me.
Okay, well, I thank you for writing this book,
Thank you,
for being
Brenda.
courageous, for sharing your story with all the women and the daughters and the men.
And the men.
And the men in this world. And I encourage our listening audience to go out and to purchase something like Beautiful One Single Mother's Story by Asha Bandele.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for having me.
You're welcome.